Hi guys, I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking a little bit more about the content in the chapters that you read this week. Okay, a narrative writing and descriptive writing often comes hand in hand. I mean, think about it this way. If you have to describe characters, if you have to describe a plot, if you have to describe a setting, you need to use descriptive details, right? And so description is something where you're tapping into those five senses, you're describing nouns, people, places, things, experiences. You can describe abstract concepts, right? Love is still a noun, but it's an abstract concept. So descriptive writing is something where you are describing something. There's small elements of descriptive writing and narration, which is why we talk about these two things hand in hand. But there can also be essays that are just devoted to descriptive writing. We're talking about sensory language, something that taps into our five senses, which we're going to get into, I think, in the next slide. Vivid, detail, figurative language, and just kind of this concept of showing instead of telling. So what that means is, like, instead of saying that I was afraid, I would say my hands were sweaty, I was shaking, I had fear in my eyes, my legs felt like they wanted to get up and run away, and that would show my fear as opposed to just straight up saying I was afraid. So just allowing your reader to kind of experience your writing firsthand by making it so vividly descriptive that they can't help but feel the things that the author is describing. Again, most writing literature uses description, and it's something that has its place in academic writing. So what I want to talk about is just this concept of the difference between subjective description and objective description. And I'm kind of like going away from this slide for just a second, but subjective description is description that's based on whoever is telling that story or whoever is describing something. It's their experiences. Think about a car accident where there's two drivers involved and both of them say it was the other driver's fault. And so they describe to the police officer what happened. Well, those are both subjective because driver number one experienced it in this way and driver number two experienced it separately. They are going based on how they felt in the moment. They're going based on what they think they saw, what they think they saw being the key phrase, I think. So there is subjective and subjectivity in description. More academic writing that relies on a lot of heavy description apart from narration is going to be based on objective description. And so if there's a reason for you to describe something, and you'll see this in the example that we read for the week on the Taj Mahal, you'll see that kind of like, well, there's some subjective description, certainly, but there's also objective description in that anyone looking at something would describe it in the same way. For example, if I had to describe the cup sitting next to me, I could measure its height, I could find the circumference of the cup, I could say exactly how much water it holds, and that would all be objective description. And so there's going to be times where there is a need for objective description in order to clearly communicate something to a reader. And there are going to be essays, particularly maybe like scientific essays, where objective description is required. And most writing includes a blend of both objective and subjective description. And that's perfectly fine. Whenever you are describing, though, don't forget to think about all of your five senses. And some of these might not apply. For example, if I am going to talk about this cup that's next to me, I may or may not want to taste the actual cup. I mean, of course I'm drinking out of it, so there's something happening there. I may or may not be able to describe the sound of the cup, although I could like flick it or pour water into it, and there's certainly some auditory sensory details that I could pull out, but just don't forget about the thing you learned a long time ago, which is the five senses. So your sight, or what you see, what something looks like, the sound, what you hear, taste, smell, and then touch. Like, what does it feel like? You know, is it plastic? Is it glass? Is it cloth? Is it smooth or silky or bumpy or rubbery or whatever? The example that's given here is really descriptive. The acid smell penetrated my nostrils as I breathed deeply. The humidity after the rain clung to my skin as I walked to my crippled car. Okay, so we can see that there's a lot of kind of like sensory details. And again, the goal is to get your reader to experience what you are experiencing. Sensory language and a lot of storytelling works really well when you want your reader to feel how you feel, or to feel how someone else has felt. Then it works really, really well with appeals to the heart, and kind of like appeals to what we'll eventually at some point get into, this concept of pathos, where you want your reader to have an emotional connection with your subject matter, and so you're going to put them into that moment and make them feel the things that you're going to feel. So if you're struggling, or if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate, send me an email, and we can talk more about narration and description, and then of course refer to the chapters in your textbook.